Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that enhances your understanding of how the world works. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent. It is Thursday, July 11th, and welcome to episode number 76, Mistakes Parents Make in the Application Process. In this week's news, college sports are affirmative action for rich white students, and we're in chapter 76 of 171 answers, and Mark shares the mistakes us parents make in the college application process. And this week's question is from a listener who wants to find out which schools offer need blind or no loan financial aid. And this week, Mark interviews Mr. Greg Roberts, who's the Dean of Admissions at the University of Virginia, and differences between public and private universities.
Anika, I am excited. I am very, very excited. We are rolling out something new. We are so grateful to all of our listeners in general, but those who have financially supported our podcast. It's allowed us to pay our staff and cover our auxiliary expenses, and we want to do something really special for you. So after talking with Anika, we are going to be sending out bonus content once a month directly to your email. It'll be about 10 to 15 minutes in length, and so it's just for a gift of any amount, whatever anybody can do to offset our expenses, and we're going to give it to anybody who's given in the past. It's not just moving forward. If you've given any time in the past, you're going to start getting bonus content. Unless you don't want it, then just reject it. But we know some of our donors, they just can't get enough college information. So once a month in your email, it'll be like an audio blog. I won't have my podcast partner here with me on it, so you'll have to deal with me solo, but maybe once a year I can recruit Anika to join us for a special one. We'll see.
I'll be listening in. I'll be gathering the content. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. So, Anika, this is our last of our countdowns on this topic. And our regular listeners know we have been counting down the 9 fastest growing jobs in the country that pay $75,000 or more. And so number 9 was operations research analyst. Number 8, information security analyst. Tied with number 8, physical therapist. Number 6, genetic counselor. Number 5, mathematician. Number 4, software developer. Number 3, statistician. Number 2, nurse practitioner. Number 1, drum roll, please. Physician assistants.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Assistants, which was one of the reasons why episode 58 we did Dr. Williams came on in here and did about a 15-minute overview on who they are, what they do, and how they're replacing doctors. And by the way, that has been our most listened to episode by a long shot. So I don't know if it was that section, but that's been our most listened to episode 58. So if you want to know more about physician assistants, go on there. But for a brief overview, they're also known as PAs. They practice medicine on teams with physicians, surgeons, and workers, and they diagnose and treat patients. And so as hospitals and the country moves to more cost-saving mechanisms, they're doing a lot of things doctors once did. They work in physician offices, hospitals, outpatient clinics. And if you want to become a PA, you are going to need a master's degree from an accredited program. And the average annual wages right now for PAs or physician assistants, $108,610. And the growth rate is 37%.
Wow.
What do you think, Anika?
I think that's actually kind of surprising. I mean, I know a couple PAs who have some family members that are PAs. And, Jalen wants to be an AA. He wants to be an anesthesiologist assistant. So that's fascinating. That's awesome, though. Yeah. All right, y'all. All right, PAs. Let's go.
Well, it shows, why you hear there's jobs in the medical field, because there are jobs in the medical field, right? The aging population and everything. So we'll have to, Nick and I will have to put our head together and come up with a new countdown, a new and exciting intro for you guys in the future. We'll We'll see what we'll roll out next week.
Cool beans.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, Mark, this week's article is entitled College Sports Are Affirmative Action for Rich White Students. And I'm going to attempt this name. The author, the writer is Sahil Desai. It's found in The Atlantic. And let's just start off with this. So African-American males are known to dominate college football and basketball. But according to this article, Mark, this is not a true reflection of who has access to college sports, which was kind of enlightening a little bit. And so let's start with this statistic that she gave, or this person gave, that 61% of student athletes in 2017 were white. Now, these lower profile sports are favored by these white student athletes. They often cost a fortune, a small fortune, probably a big fortune, for them to participate. You know, the parents training them up. And some of the ones this person cites is sailing, golf, fencing, lacrosse, which are not readily available in urban non-white high schools. And though they are low profile to the general public, they're in high demand to stack these teams at these colleges and universities. So another interesting point, Mark, I thought was made about why white students are dominant in these college sports was that they don't, these schools, these elite schools, well, specifically, they don't give out athletic scholarships. So if you got the cash and you're good, then the chips fall in your favor. And hence, the white population dominates in that area. So, Mark, do you see this as a problem or just the way that it is?
Well, it's a complex answer. Like always, you know how to get me with a zinger right between the eyes, right? And you know what I usually do? I usually push back and let me read a little bit of the article and then I'll make some comments. For you listeners, we're going to be really transparent with you. Anika and I have this ongoing debate whether when I read it's like interesting or boring. But we do. But I talked to a few listeners and they said they liked it, so I'm going to keep doing it until they.
I'm sure they do.
Of course, I handpicked some that I thought.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I want to read a little flavor of this article to give people a feel for it. But before I do, I want to make a couple comments. So this is one of these articles that when it came out, it was like a blockbuster article that was getting a lot of publicity, a lot of attention in college admission circles. And so we had already put it on our docket to discuss it. This actually, a lot of the articles we read come out like in the last couple of months. This one actually came out in October of 2018. So it's around, 8 months old now. But the interesting thing about this is this article came out before what I call the side door hustle, what the country calls, the Varsity Blues scandal with William Singer, came out before that, which is so prescient because you would think an article like this would have come out after the scandal. But let me read it and then I'll answer it and then we'll, it'll kick off some conversation because I think that people will like this. All right, so here we go. Quick, think of a college athlete. Chances are the person who comes to mind is a football or basketball player at a powerhouse D1 school, like an LSU or University of Kentucky. Maybe the player resembles Joel Embiid, who turned his chiseled 7-foot frame into a full-ride scholarship at Kansas before going to NBA stardom. But the typical student athlete more often plays a less blockbuster sport, maybe lacrosse, maybe tennis, and in many ways comes from a well-to-do family that has shelled out thousands and thousands of dollars over the years to nurture a budding athletic talent. And the majority of the time, they're white. The most visible college athletes, the ones running across the TV or in full-color photos or newspaper pages, tend to be black. Indeed, college football and basketball players skew disproportionately toward African American. But says Kirsten Heckstrom, a professor of educational leadership at University of Oklahoma, the black men in these two sports are not really the reality of who has access to college sports. But the National Collegiate Athletic Association's own estimate, 61% of student athletes last year were white. At elite colleges, the number is even higher, 65% in the Ivy League. And that's not including international students. And when you look at Division III small New England College Athletic Conference, With the elite liberal arts colleges like Williams and Amherst, the number's like 79% white. As Harvard heads to court to fend off allegations that it discriminates against Asian American applicants, the plaintiffs behind the case have released to the public reams and reams of data analyzing the college admission process. I'm going to stop here for a second, Anika, because I was there for 6 days last week, and and talking at length with William Fitzsimmons, their dean of enrollment. He had his email. He had to surrender his emails for the last 3 years, and they had to surrender 5 years worth of admissions decisions as part of the discovery process. And it's fascinating talking to him because he says he just assumes his phones are being tapped and bugged, and he's done that for a long time. It's just weird to have to kind of, go through life that way. But anyway, keep moving here. They allege, part of the discovery, the information they learned from looking at the information, that one factor used in admissions, called the personal rating, systematically disadvantages Asian American students. But tucked in the 168-page analysis of Harvard admissions data is a curious stat about another non-academic factor considered by schools: athletics. Check this out, this is powerful data. All applicants to Harvard are ranked on a scale of 1 to 6 based on their academic qualifications. And athletes who scored a 4, check this out, athletes who scored a 4 were accepted at a rate of 70%. Yet the admit rate for non-athletes with the same score, that's an admissions rating of 4, was 0.076%, nearly 1,000 times lower. Wow. Similarly, 83%, this is fascinating because this talks about how we talked about hooks the last 2 weeks and how some hooks carry more weight than others. So check this out. Similarly, 83% of athletes with a top academic score got an acceptance letter, compared to 16% of students with a top academic score who were non-athletes. Legacy admissions, in other words, people who graduated from Harvard, they get a lot of flack for being privileged white applicants. However, athletes have a much bigger effect on admissions. They also make up a much bigger percentage of the class. And it's not just Harvard. So then the article talks about the study that James Shulman, who used to be at Princeton, and the president, William Bowen, they did this study and they looked at 30 selective colleges. And in that study, they found that athletes were given a 48% boost in admissions compared to a 25% boost for legacies, being alumni, and an 18% boost for being a racial minority. So that also speaks to what we talked about last week, Anika, where some hooks carry more weight than others, right? So athletes got a 48% boost, legacies got a 25% boost, and racial minorities an 18% boost. Put another way, college sports at elite schools are a quiet sort of affirmative action for the affluent white kids. Put another way, college sports at elite schools are a quiet sort of affirmative action for affluent white kids. And they play a big role in keeping these institutions so stubbornly white and affluent. What makes this all more perplexing, says John Thielen, a historian of higher education at the University of Kentucky, is that no other nation has the equivalent of American college sports in terms of who gets into selective colleges. And then it says, when it comes to college athletics, football and basketball command the most public attention. But in the background is a phalanx of lower profile sports favored by white kids, which often cost us, you said this, small fortune to participate in. Ivy League sports such as sailing, golf, water polo, fencing, lacrosse, and I'll throw in a couple more: squash and equestrian, diving, ice hockey, field hockey, gymnastics, and crew. I think I shared this story on our podcast before of the student at my old school who was in the bottom third of his class at school. And then he left our school, attended another school in our area that had crew, and he used crew to go on to an Ivy League school. Aren't typically staples of urban high schools with big non-white populations. They have entrenched reputations as suburban country club sports. According to the NCAA, of the 232 sailors last year, guess how many were black? 0. 85% of lacrosse players were white, as well as 90% of ice hockey players. And the cost of playing these sports can be really high. Talks about the economic boundaries and how the average person is paying over $1,000 a month, to play the sport. And then it goes on to say it is no surprise that the Harvard Crimson, which is their newspaper, they do an annual freshman survey, and they found that almost half of recruited athletes in the class of 2022 come from families with households of over $250,000. And so finally, it says a few more things. It says in 2017, Ohio State's athletics program brought in $167 million in revenue. Yet, according to the NCAA, in all but 20 colleges, athletic programs lose more money than they make. That raises a baffling question. Why are colleges willing to lower their admission standards to recruit the best athletes when their expensive programs are unlikely to return the investment? In other words, these sports actually cost the schools money, right? They don't make money off them. They make their money off of football and basketball. And so, sometimes women's basketball, sometimes baseball, depending on the school. There's a few sports they make money on. Everything else is actually costing the school money, not making the school money. And then it says, incidental marketing aside, sports can also make a college seem very attractive to students. Athletics, and I can attest to that. Like, I love the sports scene. My kids love the sports scene, bringing the whole crowd together, the whole rah-rah, the whole buzz. And so many students I work with, they want to go to the place where there's a lot of buzz. And that whole school vibe and this, especially here in the Southeast, that makes the Southeast schools really attractive. The whole face painting, tailgating, all that scene, right? I don't know if you relate to that, Anika. That's not your thing, is it?
Well, my family's, yes, so I don't have a choice. I mean, I'm not fake my face, but yeah, I'm there because I'm forced to be there in most cases. But yeah, I get it.
Sound like you're like sucking a lemon or like eating prune juice the way you say it.
I am getting better though. I'm getting better.
Good.
A little bit.
Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. So then Thielen says that this is one of the few unifying activities that can bring the whole school together. Football especially, and he told me, college sports can nurture loyalty to an institution years after a student leaves campuses, perhaps inspiring people to donate more to the school. Then he says this, but how many people are really going to the sailing meets?
Yeah, it took that right out of my little mouth. And
to the other sporting events that typically don't have graduates reaching for their checkbooks. As Harvard admission policies go through the ringer, college sports have largely evaded security, even among the plaintiffs accusing the school of discrimination. People are complaining about the minority students, Hernandez says, but athletes are taking up almost a fifth of the class at Harvard and lowering their academic standards quite a bit. Granted, athletes at elite schools are far from, and he basically goes on to say, at a place like Harvard, even the athletes tend to be pretty strong academically because they're so selective. Right. And I think that is important. I don't want to sort of perpetuate a myth of the dumb jock. And in reading this. So they, push back on that a little bit, but concludes the article by saying, it's curious to me that these elite universities are holding on to these policies because I think they expose the contradictions of what universities do in admissions, according to Harvard professor Natasha Werko. So, they're blatantly privileging already privileged groups. So I know I read a lot, Anika. I hope I didn't bore the audience. What do you think? Did I read too much?
No, it was good, but it begs you to answer that darn question. Like, why are they doing this if they're not making money off of it?
Yeah, and they absolutely are doing it. I mean, I know one school in the Boston area this year alone that sent 9 athletes in these obscure sports to Harvard just this year alone. So there's a number of reasons why they're doing it, but it has to do with a lot of it has to do with tradition. People don't like change, right? A lot of it has to do with the power of the alumni. Like the alumni oftentimes are the ones who participated in those sports, so they have fond memories of those sports. And so one thing that I think is probably not completely true in the article is that while it's true that football and basketball drive multi-millions of dollars in terms of revenue and all that, it's also true that some of the alumni that played some of those sports are donors and that some of them are in powerful positions.
Okay.
And so it's kind of that combination of that, the alumni, sometimes the board of trustees who may be also alumni potentially, who may have, and they do not want to see those things. They have long memories of, when I played Yale in 1919, that kind of thing.
All you had to do was say the donor word. Okay.
Yeah, because that's the world you live in. You do donation. You come from that world, so you got it right away when I said
ding,
that.
Ding,
right?
ding, answer solved.
Ding, ding,
ding. Yep.
So I think that's a lot of it. The one thing I want to say about this, I mentioned that it was written before, Side Door Hustle Varsity Blues. I want to give our listeners a bonus recommended resource this week. So, Anika, I have a new favorite podcast. Yes. And you're like, where are you going? It links to all this. And before I tell everybody what this podcast is, because our listeners will love it, I have to tell you how I learned about it. So when I was at Harvard Admissions Institute last week, I attended this whole session on this, this side door hustle and what went on, right? And then the leader of it, he was a director of admission, a really well-known school. He stands up and he says, how many people have heard of Rick Singer before this? And this lady puts up her hand and she says, you're not going to believe this, but she knew several families working with Rick Singer as a consultant. And she was noticing that they were having fabricated extracurriculars. Like what they were reporting is not what happened. So she spoke out about it and he called her and he reamed her out. And then he went to the head of school that she was at and said, you got a college counselor there that's trying to sabotage your family's chances of getting in.
Ooh.
Yeah. And remember, the families that do this are giving lots and lots of money to these schools too. So the college counselor kind of got silenced a little bit. And I ended up having a meal with her later to talk to her a little bit more. And she's like, Mark, you have to check out this podcast called Gangster Capitalism. It's all about the whole Rick Singer story. And it's like 6 episodes, but they're like professionally done. I mean, like with like Hollywood production team, like they're really, really good. And what they did was they actually got excerpts from remember he was bugged and wired, right? So they have his actual statements, but they have actors recreating them. And it like a captivating novel.
Wow.
And if anybody's looking for something fascinating, just so interesting, if you have a long drive, the whole series to go through all 6 episodes would probably take about 3 hours. But it talks about all of this stuff. It talks about sports and it talks about things we've been talking about in the last few weeks. It talks about the stress that kids are under. It talks about the role development plays in admissions. And all these things that we've been talking about all come together in this one podcast. So I have a brand new favorite podcast, and I can't tell you, listeners, it is so good. Check out Gangster Capitalism, all 6 episodes, if you want a real look into behind the scenes how all this stuff works. What do you think, Anika?
I think that is fascinating. I just might listen to it.
Oh, you'll love it. Like it's like a fascinating mystery novel. Like, you know how certain podcasts they're done, like you feel like, gee, this may be like a multi-million-dollar budget. Like that, right. It's got that level of production quality. behind it. So let's check it out, listeners. Free bonus recommended resource. And not only will you learn about this, but all these things we've been talking about: stress kids are under, role of development, role of athletics, scandals, cheating, a lot of things that we've been talking about. It's good stuff.
Wow.
Did I answer your question, by the way?
Oh yeah, you definitely did.
Oh, because I said the D word donor.
Yeah. That's all it took.
And tradition, because people don't like to change. A place.
Well, it goes hand in hand. Yeah.
I mean, Harvard's oldest school in the country. It's coming up for its 400th birthday. And so these places go way, way, way back, some of these things, And I'm not Harvard, but
making sense now.
Sounds good. Well, let's keep on going before we have a 2-hour podcast. Because of me, not you. I'm the doctor. I just insistence on reading 7 minutes.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, friends. So we are looking at what are some mistakes that parents make in the application process. First-time listeners, I wrote a book called 171 Answers. In this part of our podcast, we go chapter by chapter through the book and give any proceeds from the book to the Atlanta Mission, which is a homeless organization in Atlanta doing fantastic work. But this is the chapter title of that book is called What Are Some Mistakes Parents Make in the College Application Process? And we actually had Brendan Barnard, for our regular listeners. He did a whole 3-part interview series in episodes 39, 40, and 41, where we looked at 20 mistakes that parents make. And Brendan said something that was really powerful at the start. And I want to say it again because I really liked it. He said, we're talking about the mistakes, but we could just as easily be talking about all the amazing things that parents do. And I really appreciate him saying that. And we got at least 1 or 2 emails from people that said, I really like how Brendan threw that in there. And I think it's important we start with that now, especially our parents who listen to a podcast like this. You love your child. You're coming back here because you love your child so much and you're trying to get anything and all you can to apply to your child to help your child in the college process. So this is not a beat you down and drag you through the mud type of conversation that we want to have, right? Because we know how many great things parents do. So it's not about disparagement. It is, however, about sometimes people have blinders. So what were some thoughts you had after reading this chapter, Anika?
Well, you came out hard on us, Mark, in the first line.
I come out of
parents. Well, you did. And you reminded us that oftentimes we're trying to live vicariously through our kids. So within that, we make a series of mistakes. And yeah. So the ones, I can see myself doing all of these. But let me just say the ones that I could just really, I just saw my face when I read it, is that, when you go into the info sessions, like you're just dominating the questions in the info sessions. Like sometimes I do like to talk and I do get a little passionate sometimes and I forget my kid is sitting there and they should be the person leading that. But you've reminded me over these, this past few years to stop doing that. Calling the admissions office too much. Not that I did that, but I can certainly, again, see myself reaching out. Listen, let's just get some clarity here. Let me just go ahead and do it while I'm on my lunch break at work. I'll just take care of this. So I can definitely see myself doing that. A big one, not starting the 529 plan. I did not do that. So that's a big one. And it's just a lot of these, but, it's ones in here like, oh, my God, refusing to pay the EFC. Like, who does that? But I know in the cases of the separated parents, there's some issues there. Another one, which was interesting, refusing to accept a denial or a wait list. I can kind of see myself doing that back in the day. Now it's just like, let's keep it rolling and we're good. It'll be fine. So, yeah, it was all of them relatable. I am not claiming this, but I'm sure this is common. The completing of the applications. Let's just get her done. Let me just
because you're such a good writer.
Now I edit. Now I'm not going to deny that I do edit. I edit heavily, as you should, as we all should be. But I will tell you, Mark. But in working with you over these past few years, I did made a concerted effort to say, you know what, let's not say this, find another way, and let's just make sure it
Good.
sounds good.
Sounds like the student, not just
So
good, but sounds like the student.
yeah, exactly. So I will take partial, in that. But yeah, it was all good, all good. What did you say you had in here? 20
Yeah,
of
but
them?
I want to kind of do what you did. I would like to highlight a few that have really been on my mind and my heart a lot that I see parents. But I would like if I had to break it down to about 8, I got about 8 biggies that I see the most, and
Okay.
most of them fall into 2 buckets. And before I talk about these, well, I'll tell you what the buckets are, and then I'll say something about it. So the buckets have to do with what I would call academic delusionment, or maybe disillusionment is maybe too strong of a word. Maybe just academically being out of touch with how competitive the process is, and therefore leading parents to say things and do things because of their lack of knowledge of how competitive certain schools are. So that would be one, and then the second was what I would call financial delusionment. And I feel so strongly about this. Our regular listeners know I do the same thing in my day job that I do in weekends and evenings, which is I work at KIPP, a charter school, and I help this year about 60 kids, 11th and 12th graders, including Janaea, your daughter, through the college process. And I got so concerned about these mistakes that I went to my boss and I said, we have to have a full day institute. We need to bring parents and students in here, and because I'm getting to them too late. By the time students are coming to me, and parents, as students and parents, they'll come to me and say things like, okay, I'm ready. Here are the schools I want to apply to: Stanford, Duke, Cal Berkeley, Michigan, Texas. And I'm like, okay, you got a 3.1 GPA. You got 1180 on your SAT and 25 on your ACT. And every single one of those schools on your list is highly unlikely that you're going to be admitted at. And so this is not good. We have got to get to people earlier. So we're doing a whole entire day, 8 hours, going over everything. Don't act surprised. You told me you were coming. You said you were.
Oh, this is
Yes,
August 3rd
August
thing.
3rd.
Oh,
Yeah, you're like,
yeah.
that's a good idea.
Okay.
You told me you were coming.
Oh, yeah, we'll be there.
You had a little
Yes, we
amnesia
sure
moment
will.
on me for a
Oh,
second.
I didn't.
You acted all surprised.
Listen, when you put stuff out, I'm like, yeah, I'm there. I ain't even looked at the content.
Well, I'm
Okay, yeah, I'm
impressed because that's a 6-hour drive for you to come back. But so we have to get to students on these things. So let me break them down a little more specifically. I'm start with the financial ones and then do the academic ones to me. So one of the absolute biggest ones you said, Anika, already, which is not starting a 529 plan early enough. Any bit you can, squirrel away, it helps so much. Obviously, you get the, tax-free growth. Some states give you a state tax break, but it just makes a difference for being able to afford college. It really, really, really does. Whatever you can do, especially our younger parents, but even older parents, like I contribute to a 529 right now for Joy, who's a junior, because I get the tax break so 529 really, really important. Huge thing, not setting expectations early enough about what you can afford. That's huge. Because people go in thinking, they're being a bad parent if they don't let the kid go to their dream school. And so the kid thinks they can go anywhere, and they get all the way to the end of the process, and then they get the bill and like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I can't afford this. And so parents need to really analyze their finances. This is chapter 21 of my book in detail. How do you come up with the exact amount that you can pay, and then having a conversation about what the student can pay and what's going to be the student's contribution, what's going to be your contribution, and approaching it the same way when you're buying a house or you're buying a car. Normally, when you're buying a house, you've already been bank approved, right? This is the maximum you can do. Well, there's no process like that in college. That's the problem. You can go into unsustainable amounts of debt. So you have to come up with your own limit, and you need to communicate that with your child and say, we will not go above that. People don't do that. It leads to all kinds of problems. That I kind of combined both 2 and 3 in there, not setting the expectations and then letting their kid go to the dream school no matter what the cost is. That's another thing. In other words, you let them go regardless. In other words, you violate this and then you say, oh, we're going to figure out a way how to do it anyway. And then kids end up dropping out and you end up no retirement and in debt, and the kid drops out and doesn't get the degree. So you lose all the way around. No college degree, more debt, less retirement. So that's really, 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 really a bad one. And then another huge one is living above your means. And this is so challenging. Because the family that makes $150,000 doesn't live like the family that makes 50,000. They just, you know what I mean? Like, okay, making more money. So now I'm going to enjoy my vacations more, my meals out. And I could have used any number. I could have said 300, whatever the number is, right? You live differently. And that's something we all do. We adjust our lifestyle to our income. Well, the college process expects a very high percentage of your discretionary money to go to college. So now you turn around and you lock yourself into bondage because maybe you bought, just throwing a number out, you bought a $700,000 house because you had the money to do it. Well, now your mortgage is demanding that so much of your discretionary money go there. Or you got a $750 car payment, or too many cars, or your vacations, or your clothes, or your, lifestyle stuff, or your vacations, or your eating habits. And then you turn around and you're like, I don't have the college process is going to say, we're not here to justify your lifestyle. That's a lifestyle decision you made. You have capacity to give. And therefore, and that this happens all the time. Now, you can also argue, we'll get into it here, that the financial process expects too much of parents, but that's not, it is what it is. You're not going to change it.
All right.
So those are the financial ones that I would say, Anika. And then the ones that I would say on the academic side would be things like this. Making your child feel like you're not proud of them based on where they're getting into college. And that is so subtle because nobody attempts to do that. But if you always get excited about all the reach schools and the challenge schools, oh, you're getting mail from this school or whatever, and you don't seem as excited about their probables and their safeties, the kids pick that up. And then they feel an incredible amount of pressure. And if they don't get in those schools, they feel like they let their parents down. And this happens all the time, and parents don't even know they're doing it.
Wow.
Having unrealistic expectations of where your child is a competitive applicant. I see this all the time. And it's just because things have changed and people don't know the competition they're up against. And so being out of touch with how hard certain schools are to get into, and not realizing how many amazing colleges are out there that people have never heard of. That's another one. And so buying into the notion that if I haven't heard of it, it must not be any good. So those are some of the things that I would say. Now, the vicariously living through their child, that is true, but we all do that to some extent. Like, let's be honest. All of us to some extent do that. You maybe some more than others. maybe some
not
people.
Me.
Maybe
not
some people
me.
that have podcasts called Your College Best.
Not me.
But we all are fighting that urge all the time. But I think it is important. One thing that Dr. Josie said in the interview I loved on her interview when she's talking about essays, she said, there is only one cook in this kitchen, and it is the student. And Dr. Josie, I've been borrowing that line, by the way. I've liked it. So I think that's important that we remember, like, we're not going, they're going. It's their experience, not ours. We had our chance. This is their life. So what do you think, Nick? Any comments on any of the ones that I mentioned?
Well, all of that. And I feel like one of our giveaways should be, we should print them out on a poster board, like the 20 commandments. And so people can just like put it up on their wall and just remember every day what not to do.
That's actually a good idea because parents are so well-intentioned. They really want what's best for their child. You're not trying to sabotage anything. It's just that, and it's especially
that's just how it comes out.
Especially hard for type A driven type of parents. It's really, 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 really hard. And I'm not trying to say these things are easy, but the effect on the kid is just they don't feel good about themselves.
Oh, yeah. Don't want that. No. Don't want that.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, this is depressing. Let's change topics.
It's necessary. Requisite.
There you go.
There we go.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Okay, Mark. Oh my goodness, we had a Jalen last week. We have a John this week.
Oh, I never even noticed that. What's up with this?
Oh, did you? Oh, that's so cute. Oh, sorry, y'all. So the question from our listener this week is from John.
And you need to tell. Remember, we always have first time listeners. So explain why you're acting the way you're acting.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So Jalen submitted a question. Was Jalen from Philadelphia last week?
Yeah.
We had a Jalen, and this week's question is from John. And I have 2 children named Jalen and John. Oh.
Well, they're not the ones
So
who sent
cute.
the questions in. This
And
John is from
not from Philadelphia, not from
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. So John from Massachusetts. Hey, John. He asked, could you please explain what the criteria or how to find out which moderate competitive or not ultra competitive schools offer the best need blind, no loan financial aid? Can you do that for John, Mark?
Yeah, and that was a mouthful of a question. Like, that was one of those questions that might have been like, 20 words, but there's so much in it.
Yeah.
So let's break it down.
Okay.
Let's break it down. First of all, need blind. You know what that is, Anika? Need blind admissions?
You know what? I was just thinking, I was like, I know this stuff, but I can't remember. Need blind.
Okay.
No, go ahead, because I'll be sitting here for a minute. Go ahead.
Yep. So need blind admissions means that an admission decision is made, whether to accept, deny, waitlist, hold, without looking at a capacity or ability to pay. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's strictly based off of the academic criteria. So in other words, the financial process and the academic process are completely separate. So some schools are need blind, and some are not. And some schools are what we call need aware or need sensitive. Now, many schools that are need aware and need sensitive are not need aware and need sensitive for every applicant. They'll start out their process need blind, and then when they run out of money, they start saying, well, you know what? We'd like to take this kid, but we don't have any money left, so we can't. So that's the first thing. So he asked about need blind. Then he asked about meeting. Read the question again, Anika.
Okay. Please explain how to find out which moderately competitive, but not the ultra competitive schools. So the moderately competitive schools, how do you find out which ones offer the best need blind or no loan financial aid?
Okay. So now I want to talk about something that can be a little confusing to people. You'll oftentimes, I know you've heard this term a lot, Anika, when you go to presentations and info sessions. You ever hear people say we meet full demonstrated need?
Mm-hmm.
You hear that term?
I do. I have.
So a lot of times people confuse meeting full demonstrated need with being need blind. So they're completely different, but they're confused. So meeting full demonstrated need means that the assessment that is done of your capacity to pay, that's not done by you, by the way. It's done by either Department of Education through the FAFSA, and they have their own methodology, which we're going to get into a lot in the future episodes. But for now, to be simple, it's an assessment of the income and assets of the student and the income and assets of the parents. So assessment of the income and the assets of the student, income and the assets of the parents spews out amount of money that the Department of Education, federal government, believes you should be able to pay for college. Okay. And then there's also another form that's used by these 180 private schools called the CSS profile that uses a lot of different criteria. And there, it can vary from school to school, but it's basically doing the same thing. Looking at the income and assets of the student, income and the assets of parents, coming with an amount of money that they believe you should be able to afford if you're, living frugally. So let's say, and that term is oftentimes called either an EFC or FC, family contribution. So let's just say that number spews out of $20,000. I'm just picking a number. It could be 50,000. It could be 5,000. So let's say that number is 20,000. And so if a school meets full need, then if the school costs 70,000 cost of attendance and your family contribution is projected to be 20, then if they meet full need, that means that they are going to give you $50,000. That's what it means by meeting full need, full demonstrated need. Mm-hmm. They meet the difference between the cost and what you should be able to pay on your own. All right. Now, that amount that they meet does include loans most of the time. Okay. Most of the time includes the federal direct loan, may also include some work study, and may even include a summer job, depending on the school. But that's considered meeting full need. And people confuse these terms all the time. Because a school could be need blind, meaning we don't look at the capacity to pay. But that doesn't mean that they turn around. So make their admission decision without knowing finances, Anika.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that they're guaranteed to give you your full demonstrated need. If they don't have the money, they don't have the money. And so that's one thing I want to, first of all, clarify. People confuse being need blind, meaning full demonstrated need all the time. They're two completely different things. There's some schools that don't meet full demonstrated need, and they are not need blind, and there's schools that are need blind and they don't meet full demonstrated. So you'll see all different computations of that, right? Meeting full demonstrated need and being need blind, not meeting full demonstrated need, not being need blind. You'll see all of it. So, by the way, is that confusing or clear?
Yeah, it's confusing.
It is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to try to break this down because this is confusing for listeners. So if it's confusing to you, then I'm not explaining it very well. Tell me where you're confused, and then I'll see if I can clear.
Well, it's I guess understanding which one you should be focused on, I guess. Do we care about being need blind, or do we care about meeting the need?
Most important thing is meeting need, because meeting whether a school meets full demonstrated need, that's going to have major ramifications for your financial aid package.
Right.
Being need blind, what being need blind means basically is that you might not get in for a school that's not need blind because they didn't have the finances to fund you.
Okay.
Now you see the difference?
Yes, light bulb. Okay.
Yeah.
I got
you. The light bulb, yeah. So need blind means they're not looking at your money when they make an admissions decision.
Okay.
Meeting full demonstrated need means if you do get in, they're going to give you an award that should be able to allow you to come.
Okay.
Is that okay? You following me now?
Yeah, I just needed to take some time to digest. That's all. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad that, that told me I wasn't explaining it very well. So now John asks, and he goes beyond that though, because he's heard about the no loan colleges.
Mm-hmm.
So most of these schools that meet full demonstrated need, which is a short list, by the way, and it's around 70, 75. It varies every year. There's a couple that, that add on and a couple that, move away from it. So every year it changes a bit. So you got around these 70, 75 colleges that meet full demonstrated need in the country. And he's correctly heard that there is another list of schools that do it without loans. So, as I said, even when a school meets your full demonstrated need, you can expect to get a $27,000 loan over 4 years from the federal government, and it's divided $5,500 your freshman year, $65 your sophomore year, and $75 your junior, and $75 your senior year. That's part of the package, as well as maybe campus employment and possibly a summer job. So even when they meet full need, there could be as much as a $10,000 student commitment between loans and work toward meeting need.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still following me? Or
Mm-hmm. I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
However, there's this very, very short list of exclusive affluent schools that meet full need without loans, right? And it's a very, very, very short list that do it. And in fact, there are actually only 19 schools in the country that do it for all incomes. And so he's asking about that.
Mm-hmm.
However, and I'm going to run through the list really quickly: Amherst College, Bowdoin College, Brown University, Colby College, College of the Ozarks, Columbia University, Davidson College, Harvard, Haverford, Johns Hopkins, Pomona, Princeton, Stanford, Swarthmore, University of Chicago, University of Pennsylvania, Vanderbilt, Washington, and Lee, and Yale. And by the way, Johns Hopkins just got on the list when Michael Bloomberg gave. Did you hear how much money he gave, by the way, Anika? He gave $1.8 billion with a B, not million, $1.8 billion with a B to Johns Hopkins, his alma mater, in order so that they could do this.
Oh.
It's the largest gift given to a college ever.
Okay.
So before that, Johns Hopkins wasn't on the list. University of Chicago is a recent addition on the list. So these, go ahead.
So Mark, but wait. Before you go though, how many of those would be considered moderately competitive?
Well, that's where I'm going.
Oh, okay.
These schools, because remember John's question, right? Remember how we pointed that out?
Right.
He's like, I want to know who meets full need without loan that's moderately competitive.
Mm-hmm.
So the initial answer is nobody. I mean, College of the Ozarks is a very unique school, so they're not as competitive as the others. But every other school on that list is ridiculously competitive to get into. They're the hardest of the hard. They're schools that are pretty much taking kids in the top 5% with, obviously recruited athletes, and there's exceptions, but really tough. So I hate to be, I was going to say Debbie Downer, but I'm not a lady. What's the Doug Downer? Donald Downer? What can I call myself?
Mark the Downer.
Mark the Miserable? Mark the Misery Maker?
There you go. Mark Misery.
I don't want to be the Mark the Misery Maker. So there is some possible good news for John. There is one exception. So those 19 schools that I mentioned that meet full demonstrated need without loans, that's for first of all, that's for loans, no loans at all incomes. There's another group of schools that will do no loans for low and modest income students. Just for example, Cornell at $75,000, they'll do it. Dartmouth at $100,000, Duke at $60,000, Emory at $50,000. Just Rice at $80,000. And just giving some examples, WashU at $60,000. Actually, they upped it to $75,000 recently. MIT $75,000. So they're and actually MIT just recently went to no loan as well. I should have had them on the list. So there's some other schools that will do it at certain incomes. But guess what? Did you notice anything about those schools I read, Anika?
Same. Hard to get into.
Same. Hard to get, like not hard, killer hard.
Yeah.
So here's where you can get the answer. Here's where there's some good news. The place where you can find schools that meet full need and sometimes without loans is on the state level. That's the only place where you can find it. Moderately selective schools, and that's a state-based policy. That's pretty much it. For example, in Colorado State University in Pueblo, that's not ridiculously selective. But if you have an income of under $50,000 and you're a Colorado resident and a Pell Grant recipient, then they will do it for you. Fairfield University they'll do it only for graduates of Bridgeport High School, so it's very targeted. Sacred Heart, also in Fairfield County, they'll do it for graduates.
Where's Fairfield County? Where's that?
Oh, that's in Connecticut. So these are for incomes. These are for incomes of under $50,000, which is not a lot of money in an expensive place like that.
Right.
So where you'll get it is in some states, and there's some state policies. Florida does it for people with adjusted gross incomes under $40,000, Florida residents. So this is one of the things that some states are doing to keep talent in their state. Northern Illinois, not uber selective. They'll do it for Illinois residents, Pell Grant recipients. And so that's really where you'll find, really where the University of Louisville will do it for, lower income families who are Kentucky residents. So you really find it in the states. University of Maryland will do it for students with a 0 EFC. That's really it. Now, to get
what about his home Massachusetts?
Yeah, I'm getting there because that's where he lives. So the news isn't as great. There are, I'll go over all the Massachusetts schools. Amherst does it for everybody. Harvard does it for everybody. Ridiculously selective, right? MIT recently doing it for ridiculously selective. Tufts does it for incomes under 60. Wellesley for incomes under 60. Williams for incomes under 75. These are all hard schools to get into. You know one thing I learned when I was at Harvard last week? Guess how many colleges within 10 miles of, 10 square miles of Boston? Take a guess, Anika.
None?
50. What do you mean none?
50?
Yeah, no.
Wait. Within their vicinity?
Within 10 square miles.
What?
Yeah, so it is I always say there's more college students per capita in Boston than any other place in the country. There are colleges galore, and a lot of them are these private, highly selective ones.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and if you actually go out to a little bit further out, there's 80 colleges. So there are colleges everywhere. Now, some maybe decent news for John. Well, I don't know. College of Holy Cross, which is still really selective, it's just not as selective as those others. And if he happens to live in Worcester, they do it. But he has to live in Worcester, and he has to have an adjusted gross income of under 50. So I don't know if his income's there, and I don't know if he lives in Worcester. And then Boston University will do it for Boston residents that graduate from Boston public schools kids. So I don't think I have great news here for John, but maybe for somebody else listening. If
Yeah.
you live in some of these other states and you're trying to go to college to meet full need without a lot of loans or no loans, um, there's some schools that do it for everybody, but they're really, really hard to get into. There's some schools that do it for lower income. They tend to also really be hard to get into, but there are some state schools. Now, in North Carolina, Anika, you have some options.
Do I?
Appalachian State, you got to be below the poverty line, though. Sorry. North Carolina State, you got to be 150% of the poverty line. They do it, once again, for North Carolina residents. And Chapel Hill does it for people 200% of the poverty line. So check your state policy out. Like, I'm not going to go through every single state and list them all because I think we would bore everybody that's not in those states. But there are some schools on a state by state basis that do it, and they're not always the most selective at all, like Texas State and San Marcos and Lamar in Texas.
So, okay, but when you check your state, what does that mean? You go to the Department of Education for your state?
Well,
like who?
No.
What's the repository of information for that by state?
You know what? I'll tell you what. If somebody's interested in this, just send us an email at questions@yourcollegebank.com, and I'll send them the information for every single state.
Okay.
I have it, but I don't even know where they would go on their state's higher authority website. Like it may be there, but I don't know if it is, and it might take an hour to find it if it is.
Oh, that's so nice.
If you're really interested in this list, just send us an email, questions@yourcollegebank. I'll be happy to mail it. I said mail it.
Going old school, Mark.
Going so old. Speaking about going old school. So, I use stamps.com, right? To mail out my book and mail out all the stuff that we mail out. So the other day, I had a bunch of books and other things to send out to people. And I missed the post lady when she came by. So I go by the post office because I had to go over there. So I said, while I'm there, why don't I just buy a little pack of stamps? I'm thinking stamps are still like 25 cents.
Oh,
I go in there like, pack of stamps, and they're like $11. I'm like, excuse me?
Mark?
Excuse me? I said, how many stamps am I getting?
Time you...
I mean, this has like been over a decade. It's been like 15, 20 years. I don't do that. I use stamps.com. And
you know how much gas costs now, right?
Yeah. But I'm like, a little book of stamps, like $11. I said to the lady, I said, the last time I bought them, they were $5. You should see how she looked at me.
Yeah, I'm sure she did.
And then I said, how many stamps am I getting for my $11? She said 20. So I'm a little bit George Bush out of touch. Remember when he didn't know the price of bread or the price of milk or something? I'm a little George Bush out of touch here.
All your stamps.
You know what? We're getting crazy. We better transition.
Oh my goodness.
We have so much fun on this podcast. It's so much fun.
Okay, where are we? Question? Okay.
No. We got to do the introduction of the interview. Oh boy! Was there anything else on John's answer, by the way, or did we?
You got it.
We did it.
There you go, John. Or other people that may benefit from John's question. Sorry, John.
Sorry, John. I wish I had better news. But you know what? One thing John didn't say, his kid might be a rock star.
That's true.
Might be able to qualify for some of those schools.
There it is.
But he did ask about moderate selectivity. He sure did.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends, I am really, really excited about this. I think you're going to love it as well. This is the University of Virginia's Dean of Admissions. Really fantastic guy. Met him in Atlanta about a half a year ago. He agreed to come on the podcast. And then he's also one of the leaders at the Harvard Summer Institute. So I got to spend some great time with him last week as well. But Greg Roberts is our guest for the day. And in part one, he shares where he grew up, his background, the different colleges he attended. He also talks about the main differences between the University of Virginia and other public colleges. And he talks about how UVA has used their FOIA programs. So we're going to hear about that. And then he talks about how complex it is doing admissions at a place like the University of Virginia because of how they have to balance in-state applicants and out-of-state applicants, and they have these 5 different colleges that they directly admit to. So I think you're going to really enjoy it. This is going to be a 4-parter. Greg's going to go and say some exciting things in the future. He's going to talk about Charlottesville really candidly He's going to talk about their recent decision to add early decision. And he's just really honest and candid and just an overall good guy. Listen and enjoy. I'm here with Greg Roberts, the Dean of Admissions at the University of Virginia. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Greg.
Thank you, Mark. Glad to be here.
Yes, I have to tell you how I met Greg. He was on a dean's panel at Westminster School in Atlanta. I was really impressed with a lot of things he said. We got to chit-chatting afterwards, and next thing you know, I asked him if he wanted to be on the podcast, and he said what I knew he was going to say ahead of time: call me after May 1st. and so here we are today. But Greg, I was reading a little bit about your bio. I see you lived in Atlanta for a while.
I did. Loved Atlanta. Lived there for virtually the entire decade of the 90s, which were the glory days to some degree. But have a soft spot for Atlanta for sure.
So you were here during the Olympics and the boom. Good stuff.
Oh, yes. Quite a time.
Yeah, so why don't you take a little bit of time, tell us about your backstory, where you grew up, how you got interested in admissions, and any various admissions roles you've served in.
Yeah, of course. So I was born and raised in Virginia, believe it or not. I was born in Newport News, which is a town near the coast, sort of near Virginia Beach. My dad's side of the family was from down that way, but most of my life I spent in Northern Virginia, although, this was the 70s and 80s, and so where we were located was hardly considered the D.C. metropolitan area or Northern Virginia. It was on the outskirts, the rural farmland at the time, but of course now D.C., like most major areas, metropolitan areas have spread out quite a bit. But I grew up in an area, if you're familiar, near Dulles Airport, Centerville, Virginia, near Manassas, where of course the Civil War battlefields are and so forth. And I attended Chantilly High School, which is a public high school in Fairfax County. It was relatively new at the time, and in fact, it was a public where it was a secondary school. So 7th through 12th grade attended the same school, and it didn't seem unusual to me at the time. But now that I have a 15-year-old who just finished his 9th grade year, and I saw what he was like as a 12-year-old coming out of 6th grade, I shake my head and wonder how we survived 12-year-olds with 18-year-olds. Of course, this was a time when there were smoking courts. It always seemed like a rougher time in some respects. But nonetheless, I attended Chantilly. And what was fascinating, I think, to some degree about that time was, as you know, philosophies on education and learning environments seem to evolve and change and sometimes even come back. And one of my most vivid memories is that at Chantilly, this was an era with open classrooms, and so there were very few doors, and so you could look 2 or 3 classrooms down and see your buddy on the top of overlooking a partition, and it seems to me that it would be incredibly disruptive, and I don't understand why that was a trend. But as I thought about it, maybe it led the way to sort of the Google environments you see now that are pretty open. My son, in fact, today he has an internship at a local startup, and it has that sort of setting, that loose setting with really no walls, and so like just about everything from skinny jeans to Adidas superstars, you give it long enough and they'll come back, I suppose. But
yes.
Anyway, I grew up in Centerville, went to Wake Forest University, which is a bit of a stretch for me. As a high school senior, very few of my friends left the state of Virginia. And in fact, I had planned to attend James Madison with a buddy of mine. And, it gives me today an understanding of how students make decisions. And I hope they make them for reasons that are a little bit deeper than mine. I recall it was April. I had been admitted to the schools. I had a decision to make and was pretty set on, James Madison, which is about an hour and a half from where I grew up. And my parents more or less forced me to go to visit Wake Forest, which was the one out-of-state school that I applied to. And I applied because I was a basketball fan, and I remember sort of the glory days of Wake Forest basketball. But nonetheless, they dragged me down to Winston-Salem, which is a 5-hour car trip, and we happened to hit it on one of those absolutely gorgeous Chamber of Commerce spring days on a Friday. There was a festival going on and so forth, and immediately it felt like home. And I knew very little about the stuff I should have known more about, but it was just a feeling that struck me, and it felt like what I thought college should feel like, and so I attended Wake. Ultimately, I graduated, moved to Atlanta, had various jobs from a telemarketer to a waiter to working at an Embassy Suites hotel for a year, but then ultimately went back to grad school, obtained my master's degree, and then moved back to Atlanta and found my way to Woodward Academy.
Oh, I didn't know you were at Woodward.
Absolutely, yep. Independent school, loved it. Worked for the dean of admission there, so I was on the admissions side of the desk for 3 or 4 years, and then ultimately made my way to Emory as a admission counselor when I was 28 years old. I was making about $20,000 a year. Started late, but Emory was a terrific experience. Got my foot in the door with college admission, learned a little bit about financial aid, and then ultimately I moved to Georgetown for 4 years before arriving in Charlottesville in 2003 as the associate dean of admission.
Wow. So you've been at UVA now for, more than 15 years. You said a number of things in there that resonated with me. Newport News, I'm sure you're familiar with Virginia Wesleyan, a little small school not that far from there.
Of course.
Yeah, they recruited my daughter really hard for basketball. She considered committing there. And then you mentioned James Madison. We do family reunions in Massanutten. Right around the corner from Madison. And then when I did boarding school admissions, I had Northern Virginia as my territory. So all those small towns in there, I know them all. Interesting.
No, it's a fascinating state. It's really changed incredibly, since I was a kid. Of course, I guess most areas have, but politically and in terms of the landscape and the conversations in the state, it's really a remarkable, diverse place. You could be in Northern Virginia, which is, a pretty large and busy and vibrant area. It tends to sort of dominate the conversation when it comes to the state. But, if you travel 4 or 5 hours from Charlottesville, which would be maybe 8 hours, 9 hours from Northern Virginia, it's coal mining country down there. And so, one of my jobs that perhaps we'll get into at UVA is to try to attract students from throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia with, keeping in mind that students from these different areas have very different life experiences and very different expectations and goals. And so I think it's one of the challenges that we face every year.
Why don't you talk to us about your 16-year stint at UVA and various roles that you've had? You don't just become the dean of admissions overnight.
Yeah, I came to work for Jack Blackburn. Jack was a legend in the field, just a wonderful, kind, thoughtful, smart man. I've never met anyone who didn't love Jack, and he was the type of guy, I tell you, that even as dean would go and represent the university at a small college fair in the middle of August in rural Virginia in an unair-conditioned gym.
Wow!
Where every rep in the gym would be about 24 years old, and there'd be Jack, the dean of admission, and whereas the younger reps would all have their shirt sleeves rolled up and ties askew and sweating, he would be back there with a sharp, crisp blue blazer, tie not a hair out of place, and
wow.
He was really a remarkable man, and I came to work for Jack and as his associate dean of admission. And in 2009, he had decided to retire, and I was applying for this position. And sadly, he passed away. He had a pretty advanced stage cancer, and he died. And at that point, I took over and was ultimately named the dean. So that was a heck of a challenging year. But I learned a great deal from Jack, not only in terms of admission, but just he represented what I believe is everything that's good about people and about higher education and how to treat people. So I worked for Jack, and then under sad circumstances, I took over for him in 2009 and have been dean ever since. So I've been at about 11 classes under my belt at this point.
let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
The recommended resource for the week is the 3rd out of 10 that we are doing on raising emotionally healthy children. It is the book, The Price of Privilege, and the subtitle of The Price of Privilege is How Parental Pressure and Material Advantage are Creating a Generation of Disconnected and Unhappy Kids. And the book is by Dr. Madeline Levine. Now, this groundbreaking book looks at children of affluence. Dr. Levine, a well-known clinical psychologist, exposes the epidemic of emotional problems that are disabling America's privileged youth, thanks in large part to what she describes as normalizing intrusive parenting tactics that stunt the emotional development of the next generation of children. What the book does is it looks at things like anxiety and depression, eating disorders, substance abuse, and the pressure students feel, as well as the extreme unhappiness and how these are increasing at an alarming rate. And the author of the book, Dr. Madeline Levine, she's a clinician, a consultant, and educator with over 25 years of experience. Highly recommend this book, The Price of Privilege. We will now return to my interview with Greg Roberts, the Dean of Admission at the University of Virginia. Well, one thing that's great, obviously you're at a public school, and so it sort of seems like, you had a good role model, and you've continued sort of that, the spirit of a public school, looking out for all the residents of the entire state. So that's fantastic. And that's actually a great segue today. So friends, a lot of our regular listeners know that when I identify a guest that I'd like to have on the podcast, next thing I try to do is have them speak about an area of passion and expertise, and particularly if it's one that we haven't had addressed by an interviewee in the past. And so, Greg and I in our pre-meeting went back and forth about a number of different topics. And as soon as he said, well, I've done a lot of presentations on the differences between public and private school, it wasn't even out of your mouth, Greg. I was like, bingo, I knew that was it, because we actually haven't had any one of our thought leaders, which is what I call our interviewees, address that topic. And I think that'll be of great interest to our listeners. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how public schools are different from private schools. So let's start off just with the basics, Greg. What's a public university, and how's the basic structure of a public university different from a private university?
Well, I say, Mark, it's when we spoke about this, the reason it was interesting is because I'm not so sure that high school students, prospective students, and families, as they approach the college admission process, are always aware of the differences, and not only in terms of how these, private or public might, engage or interact with the students on the front end, but what the experience might be on the tail end. I'm far from an expert on public higher education, but I have been here for long enough to really understand and appreciate the challenges and opportunities and responsibilities of a public university. And to be honest with you, it's hard to answer a question like this because publics are so very different. I think often folks will think of a public as a flagship public, a university of, and then you can insert a state name afterward. And these are typically institutions that are bigger and larger and complex. Often they enroll a high percentage of students from that state, taxpayers from that state. But keep in mind, there are many, many smaller regional or liberal arts types of publics. I look at William and Mary, one of the best publics in the country, which is in Williamsburg, Virginia, a very small population. Some would probably think it is private. Or you have a something like Cornell, which has a bit of a blend of a public and a private to it. And so it's hard to, keep in mind as I try to address this question. I'll be speaking to some degree, generally, but publics do operate, differently. Frankly, there are some, say California or North Carolina have systems, state systems, where the schools are closely linked together. For example, in North Carolina, there'd be the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Asheville, on and on and on.
Okay,
Whereas
I
in the
have
state
to
of
cut you off for a sec. So you got to say University of North Carolina, Charlotte, because my daughter works there.
in North Carolina, Charlotte, that was what I was.
She graduated from Davidson, and she works at University of North Carolina, Charlotte. But
Sure.
no, point well taken. Yeah, keep going. You're on a roll. I love it.
No, sure. Yeah, these schools operate differently than, for example, the state of Virginia, where schools by and large are more autonomous, and there are pros and cons to both. I would have to say, and to the point that sometimes states with systems, there are more appropriations and budget that goes towards higher education, perhaps than a state that does not have that type of system, but that might not be universally true. So I will say that publics, this is pretty logical. They serve the public. At UVA and other public schools, we have a responsibility to the taxpayers of the state. And, honestly, it's a tremendous honor and it's an important mission. We're owned and operated by the state. Every month I'll get a paycheck, and it won't be from Virginia. It'll be from the state of Virginia. And, the classrooms, the residence halls, the facilities, they're all owned by the state. And for that reason, there are parts of our job that can, be a little bit more tedious or cumbersome, having to go through and follow state regulations and, hiring processes and things of that nature. So I do think that the privates probably enjoy a little bit more freedom and flexibility in their policies and decision making. They are also shielded from FOIA, which means that as a public institution, more or less everything that we do is open to the public. And so this could be as simple as, a FOIA request to receive my emails to, the director of financial aid, for example. So everything that we put in writing, I have to think in the back of my mind,
who do I want to see it? Who do I want to read it?
Right. This could be on the cover of the front page of Washington Post. And I think there's a good reason for FOIA, of course, but there's oversight that you might not see as tightly as you would at a private school. I'll also say that to me, the way we operate as a public institution that is, has that's pretty popular. It's pretty visible, not only in the state, but also around the country and around the world. Our challenges and opportunities are not altogether different than the private schools I worked for, Georgetown, Emory, went to Wake. These types of schools are all looking to enroll richly diverse and talented students. I will say that most of the students that go to college in this country will go to a public school. And what I think happens in our world is that a lot of the attention is focused on a tier of schools, a top tier selective schools. And those schools only enroll and educate a very small fraction of the students that go to college in this country. And in fact, if you look at some of the larger flagships that might be perhaps a little bit less selective in their admission policies, they are also tend to be, have more needy students. They're less expensive for the state residents. They tend to be quite diverse, and they have a very important mission in this country. And so sometimes I worry that the attention that goes to the top privates and the most recognizable publics like a UVA or a North Carolina or Michigan really confuse and perhaps even frighten families and students because they think every school operates in this elite realm when the vast majority don't.
No, I think there's definitely something to that because it's not uncommon at all for, for if I'm working with a student and they get their first acceptance and they're like, I'm going to college. And it's almost like there was this fear in the back of their mind they were going to get shut out everywhere when more than 80% of colleges accept the majority of the students that apply, right? It's a really small percentage that are at the sort of selectivity level that you're at. And even where you're at, you've got differences between in-state and out-of-state, right? So the 65% of applications at UVA that need to come in-state, going back to what you said before, that would be legislated above your level, right? That's not an internal UVA decision. Am I correct?
Right. I think that's, Mark, that's the one complexity that publics are more likely to experience than privates. And often it's driven by the population of that state. For example, Vermont probably doesn't have enough high school graduates to enroll 75% of their class from the state of Vermont. So they have to enroll large numbers of out-of-state students. You have a state like Virginia where there are larger numbers, heavier the density of population is greater, and so therefore there is a lot of interest by Virginians in coming to schools like UVA. And so the question of how many Virginians versus how many out-of-state students gets to be pretty charged at times, and in fact, it can find its way to legislative bills in Richmond that are trying to mandate the residency balances of public institutions. We have an agreement with the state. It has not changed since I've been at Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, about 70% of our students are Virginians, 30% are out of state. But when you look at the first year class, the freshmen, it's 67-33. It pumps up a bit because of the transfers tend to be mostly Virginians. But what this does is it adds a layer of complexity to our review. If I'm speaking to a large group of prospective students, some of them are likely to be Virginians and some are out-of-state students and some are internationals. The admission policies, the review process is the same, but the offer rates and the selectivity levels do vary because of limits to the number of certain types of students we can enroll and larger applicant pools from those very groups. So in other words, when we shoot for a class of 67% Virginian, 33% out of state, it's 2/3, 1/3, as you can see, but the applicant pool is flipped.
Right.
So that 2/3 of the applicant pool are actually out of state and they're vying for 1/3 of the spots. And so that decreases the offer rate for that group. But we can get into, our review. I found when I came to UVA that most of the challenges, opportunities, the review itself, the holistic review, were very similar to the types of policies and procedures that we had at the selective privates. The difference would be within that evaluation, trying to find the appropriate balance of students in each of our 5 undergraduate schools. So, for example, I'll have a class target that is provided to me each year from the provost, but then it'll be subdivided into 5 different schools: architecture, engineering, the college, and so forth. And even within those groups, I'm trying to achieve residency balance. So, without trying to make this too complicated, there are about 10 applicant pools to fill one class. And that is a little bit different than what I experienced at
Emory.
Georgetown, where there are a few, or Emory, where there are a couple. So it can impact how we make some of our decisions, which creates some confusion.
Next week in the news, colleges mine data on their applicants. And we'll be in Chapter 77 of 171 Answers. And we're talking about how admissions offices evaluate transfer applicants. And next week's question asks how colleges view students who graduate from high school a year early. And Mark continues his interview with admissions dean Greg Roberts in understanding the differences between public and private colleges and universities.
Is going to be good stuff. Anika, we got some good feedback from how we kind of talked about last week, sort of the experience in Boston at the Harvard Summer Institute. So I've got some more trips coming up. And I think maybe after my trip, I'll share, with listeners some tidbits that they can take away. Like I've got one coming up to UGA. I've got one coming up to Stanford. And the one at Stanford is also going to have 6 other colleges there. It's going to have San Jose, San Francisco, Pomona, Occidental, Cal Berkeley, and I forget the other one. And then I'm also flying out to Western Massachusetts to Smith College again in July. So I got a busy July of a lot of colleges, but I'll try to share some things with listeners that I think they might be interested in after every trip at the end of the podcast. Besides, if someone can survive us for an hour listening to us, they deserve bonus content.
Do they?
Maybe I should say me, not us. They can survive me, not you.
You're all good, Mark. All good.
You sound like you're back on your feet and fully recovered, though.
I think I am. I am.
Good. It's all good. All right. Talk to you later.
See ya.
Don't hang up.
I know. I say, see ya. Hit the button. Oh,
yeah. Well, every time you do that, I think of episode 4 that we recorded four times. Four times. That's when we knew that podcasting was meant for us, because we endured and we didn't quit. Think about it. We could have, like, some other people would have said, I'm done with podcasting, 4 recordings.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by John Lockenbaugh. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.